Chapter 66. Dawn Rothlanders III was exerting her power to the limit. She strained as the Time Lord in the cobalt suit stood by. He was not only watching the futility of her act, he was being forced to absorb the excess of her power. The side effect, the aging. Ahead of them, walking down the time-frozen bonfire, was Deceit. The Time Lady had stolen and possessed the body of Dawn Rothlanders III's ancestor, Jade, another time-sensitive, able to pause a moment, also a former companion to Mr. Blue. "D3!" the Time Lord in the blue uttered with futility. Yet it was too late. Time began to rush forward in a surge of motion as D3 collapsed, unconscious. Sully stooped to her side as Mr. Blue stepped backward instinctively, taking in the scene. The Sisters of the Coven shrieked in terrified shock, scattering back into the darkened wood, submerging into the shadows as time returned to normal. Not before the doorway was opened, all of the power harnessed. A white void existed for but a fraction of a second, searing through the fabric of reality, striking like lightning, and gone more suddenly. Jack Valentine, known as the Marquis in this time period, phased into existence as the bonfire roared back to life. A strange and hazy emerald glow pulsed around him as the temporal warlock stepped down through the burning embers, emerging through the flame untouched. The retired Commodore struggled with the overexerted, unconscious D3.
"So, you're going to stop them plan of yours? More really like you fail and pass out thing, eh?"
"Quiet, get out of purge," Mr. Blue uttered. Sully looked up to see Deceit, surrounded with the freaky, crackling purple lightning. The renegade time bitch was smiling at Valentine, leering almost, her eyes glowing amethyst. Valentine grinned like a shark also, stepping toward Mr. Blue and his wayward companion. Every step the Paradox Sorcerer took scorched the earth.
"My old enemy, the Time Lord,"
Valentine sneered.
"The sad traveler. I see you've gotten older. Far, far older. Old, tired, hot. Both of them. So old. And tired."
Mr. Blue nodded.
"And I see you still have no taste in fashion. My God, man, Razalon look. The ancient, pretentious, and slightly homoerotic Gallifreyan headdress doesn't make a good time magician."
"I'm a Paradox Sorcerer,"
Valentine shouted.
"Who looks like a bloody ponce?"
Mr. Blue was smiling. Sully could tell he was angry, remembering that the Time Lord said he never, ever became frightened, only angry. As the two temporal enemies argued, the retired Commodore saw his opportunity, so Sully tried to drag D3 into Purge, safely away. Deceit's bolt of violet plasma scorched the side of the cerulean grandfather clock, barring Sully's entry, while also melting the nearby shrubbery. The temporal warlock looked back at Deceit, tilting his head, and then staring forward at the outmatched, outgunned, and absolutely ancient-looking Mr. Blue. Valentine was grinning again.
"Your snarky gay biting tells me that it completely kills you."
He held his hand out for Deceit. "That I won. It appears, not only that, I corrupted your first crush, your little sidekick, your Jade." The renegade time lady, who occupied Jade's form, took the hand of the apparently victorious time warlock. Mr. Blue watched their increasing temporal energies merging. He looked down at Sully. Before the light of the Time Lady and the Time Sorcerer could grow any brighter, the old Time Lord held up his hand.
"Very well. Very well."
"Very well what, Time Lord?"
Valentine demanded. Mr. Blue faltered.
"I concede. I surrender. You've won. Please, just let my friends leave."
Sully stood, now angry himself.
"No, are you out of your mind, old boy? You've never quit. Ever. Even when I thought we were done for."
The elderly Time Lord adjusted his azure tie, whispering,
"It's the only chance you and D3 have. You need to leave."
"We can take the pair. You can take them."
The retired Commodore urged.
Come on, traveler. I know you have a plan.
What?
Mr. Blue shouted at Sully.
What plan? Saber is missing. Ruckus rebuilt his civilization and left. My time watch is destroyed. I have nothing left to work with.
But you must.
Must what? Damn it, Sully. Should I waggle my bloody stick at them?
The old Time Lord in the cobalt suit shook his exclamation point cane slightly menacingly.
No. If mine enemies will have me, then I will have some semblance of dignity.
He turned his attention back to Jack Valentine, the Paradox Warlock.
What say you? I give myself to you, and deceit freely, in exchange for the lives of Sully and D3, my companions.
The temporal sorcerer looked back at Deceit. The renegade Time Lady grinned and shook her head no. Valentine returned his gaze to Mr. Blue, smiling his conniving smile.
You heard the boss.
The Time Lord in the blue suit dropped his head to his chest. Then he dropped his cane.
I'm sorry, Sully.
As Valentine grew brighter, absorbing ambient temporal artron power, Sully watched the renegade Time Lady draw closer behind him. The Time Warlock fired an enormous bolt of superheated violet plasma intended to atomize the Time Lord, his TARDIS, and his two friends. Yet the sparking, crackling, and nebulous anti-time sphere of iris-colored death stopped short, frozen at the precise moment before contact. Suddenly, the act was reversing itself in time, slowly, the projectile lazily reversing back toward Valentine. The Time Sorcerer appeared confused. Mr. Blue looked up, also confused. Valentine turned back to Deceit, some slight panic in his tone.
What the hell?
The Paradox Magician hadn't noticed Deceit place her hand on his shoulder. It became a crushing vice as she began to suck, and draw, and pull, and drain. And drain, and drain, and drain the Time Warlock. Immediately, he appeared emancipated. The gigantic sphere of lilac energy collapsing into shocks and tentacles of purple electricity, which snaked around the air, around Valentine, wildly. The air in the clearing around the bonfire whipped up into a wild frenzy. Smoke and purple and green light whipped around Mr. Blue and the retired Commodore, who covered D3.
What is happening? Was this part of your plan?
The noise and the light of electricity stabbing through the air made it impossible for the retired Commodore to hear the Time Lord's response. After several moments of searing noise and horrendous light, everything became quiet.
No,
Mr. Blue finally said as he stood straight, dusting off his azure tie.
Most definitely not my plan.
Across the clearing, in front of the now low-burning bonfire, stood Deceit, glowing more brightly than ever. She was emitting a strobe of emerald and violet light, pulsing the purple and green in rhythm, sending strange shadows scurrying across the ancient forest. Before her lay Jack Valentine, unconscious and unharmed. Sully began to ask something.
What in the...
Deceit stole all of Jack Valentine's power,
the Time Lord replied.
Although, how in the name of Razalon did she do it is completely beyond me.
The renegade Time Lady seemed to notice Mr. Blue. Her light show slowed and dimmed as she stepped over the former temporal warlock, now a lowly human.
You didn't just steal his temporal power,
Mr. Blue observed.
You drained him of all possible future as a paradox sorcerer by taking it all for yourself.
Deceit nodded. When she finally spoke, her voice echoed so strangely it gave Sully chills. Jack Valentine has been erased and replaced with the version of Jack Valentine which existed prior to his meeting with the doctor. Sully looked at Mr. Blue.
What doctor? Doctor who?
Don't worry about it.
The Time Lord in the cobalt suit shook his head. Sully urged.
What does it all mean?
Deceit looked at her Ever-TARDIS, which was now glowing a solid, powerful, iris-hued light. It means that with the negative temporal energy left by the void of the Paradox Warlock, my Ever-TARDIS is complete.
Which means what exactly?
Sully asked Mr. Blue.
It means the renegade time lady has created a time machine that is a fixed point in existence. It can never be destroyed. It can produce unlimited energy for all existence.
You can stop her, right?
The Time Lord gripped the retired Commodore by the neck, nearly shouting in his ear.
Have you not been listening? Deceit may have found a way to become immortal, you old fool.
Sully barely noticed it. What Sully surely registered was the bizarre twinkle in Mr. Blue's eye. It came from nowhere, yet conveyed so much to the retired Commodore. The old Time Lord in the faded blue suit winked at Deceit. There was an explosion, then tremendous and thundering. Pure white energy encapsulated the renegade time lady. Arms of piercing brightness constricted it around her. Deceit was screaming as she was crushed in the grip of this inexplicable vice of shocking white electricity. It surged around her endlessly, in brighter and brighter streams. Mr. Blue picked up his cane, staring behind the screaming Deceit.
About time.
Sully blinked past the vast luminescence to see Saber standing behind that renegade time bitch. The beautiful time agent waved briefly before returning her grip to the strange alien device in her hands.
Okay,
the retired Commodore began.
Now, you've really got to explain.
Shush, Sully.
The Time Lord grinned. Deceit continued to wail in agony until the entire forest was visually ablaze with the unexpected, voluminous white. Saber struggled to hold the bizarre alien relic in her hands as it vibrated almost until shattering. The light subsided as the shrieks of Deceit seemed to echo into nothingness. When Sully finally uncovered his eyes, he saw that Deceit was gone. Laying on the ground and unconscious in the Time Lady's place was a pretty young woman who had pink hair and black lipstick. She lay next to the also unconscious Jack Valentine. The retired Commodore shrugged and tended to D3. As he saw, she was fine. Sully hobbled his way over to Mr. Blue and Saber, missing most of their conversation. Have it back by 8, Saber finished explaining something to the Time Lord in the cobalt suit.
How did you even make it back from 1998 after Deceit stranded you?
The time agent pulled her ponytail tight. Wasn't easy.
What in the bloody hell has happened?
Sully demanded.
And what was that?
He pointed at Saber's odd backpack and attached device.
Our friend here borrowed the... what was it again?
Saber sighed. Temporal deretrogrator?
Temporal deretrogrator,
Mr. Blue announced.
From Jack, back in Torchwood.
Sully shrugged.
So, what is a
The attractive time agent interrupted him. There's a device called a chameleon arc, which a Time Lord can use to transubstantiate into a human. This process can be reversed with a similar Time Lord technology. This, gun basically emulates that technology. Sully appeared confused. Mr. Blue placed an arm around the time agent friend.
Saber here. Not only saved our collective arses.
He smiled, which caused Saber to smile.
She ripped the Time Lord essence from Jade.
Mr. Blue crouched down, his face softening as he stared at his long-lost companion.
So, where is Deceit? Finally dead?
Sully asked. Mr. Blue didn't answer, but ran his fingers through Jade's hair. Saber answered for him. In here. She knocked on the metallic storage device she wore, which was attached by silver wire to this strange alien gun in her hands.
What?
Saber continued. The Time Lord bioform essence was separated from Jade's human construct, then stored here.
You sucked Deceit, her soul or whatever, out of Jade? Put her in your bleeding backpack?
Saber nodded. Pretty much.
Like Ghostbusters style?
Ghostbusters in time. Saber grinned. Kinda. Not really, though, no. Mr. Blue stood, staring down at Jade and Jack Valentine. What to do with them? Saber observed. They're both at temporal apex point.
What's that mean, then?
The retired Commodore demanded, cranky. The Time Lord leaned on his exclamation point cane.
It means that they've been restored to the exact point at which they came into contact with the temporally
Submersive, Saber offered.
Well, I do my best.
Mr. Blue winked. Sully slowly walked toward Deceit's Evertardis.
What are you going to do with it, time machine? Can I have it? The missus would love.
Saber slowly took off the futuristic backpack and wire-attached gun, handing it to Mr. Blue. I'm not sure. I figure Jack will want to take it back to Torchwood. Otherwise, see if he can get in touch with the doc. Deceit's Evertardis shot out a tentacle of purple electricity, wrapping around Saber. The time agent struggled bitterly. Mr. Blue dropped the alien weaponry, Deceit's temporal essence in the box, clattering to the ground. As the Time Lord struggled to reach the time agent, she was wrenched into the air by the violet energy tendril, slammed to the ground a few times, then flung into the atmosphere. Sully's jaw dropped open when he saw Saber's form grow tiny as the time agent sailed through the air, to land somewhere miles and miles in the distance. The old Time Lord shouted, then dove for the container. The Evertardis reached it first. It wrapped iris electricity around the device, snatching back the container which housed its mistress's temporal essence, Deceit's Time Lord Matrix. Her soul was dragged back into the Evertardis. It began to spin.
What's it doing now?
Sully shouted.
Run!
Mr. Blue yelled back. The two old men turned, running back at Purge as the Evertardis randomly fired lasers of violet. Mr. Blue picked up the unconscious D3, handing her to the retired Commodore. He turned to go after the sleeping forms of Jade and Jack Valentine, but was stopped by Sully.
You can't do anything for them, old boy, except get shot.
The Time Lord's eyes grew hard.
I owe it to Jade to try.
He pushed Sully and D3 into Purge. Sully gently placed D3 into a chair near the Arctic and Lapis control console. He looked overhead.
Purge, are you there? D3 is hurt and...
The familiar, metallic, and brash female voice of Purge echoed from overhead.
Acknowledged. Taking countermeasures. Where's Capes Ilonekor the Traveler?
Who?
Mr. Blue. Where is Mr. Blue?
Purge shouted. The Time Lord in the dirty, shabby old azure suit materialized through the wall. He was walking slowly, his cane dragging with a click-clack sound at his side. He appeared tired, worn, more so than usual. Sully tilted his head.
What's the problem, old boy?
Mr. Blue collapsed into his chair, a streak of bright orange blood trailing from his chest.
I couldn't reach them, Sully. You were right.
Oh, Lord.
The retired Commodore searched for a towel. Purge's voice resonated, this time much more softly.
Wound occurrence. Creating countermeasures.
Don't you dare!
Mr. Blue shouted. Purge began to argue, but the Time Lord stopped her, slamming down his cane.
I will not regenerate. Not now.
You have been shot,
the time machine shouted back.
One of your hearts is dead.
Mr. Blue breathed heavily, leaning forward.
So, I'll have one heart. Humans managed to do it just fine.
The injured Time Lord tried to laugh, but coughed out more bright orange blood.
Besides, we have to go. Well, haven't you noticed? We're under attack.
Mr. Blue forced himself to the multi-sided lectern, opening the view screen to show Deceit's Evertardis, firing bolts of violet lightning at Purge.
Acknowledged,
Purge replied. The familiar echo of mechanical angels wafted through the forest of ancient France. Purge, the faded blue grandfather clock, began to dematerialize, yet not before the Evertardis latched onto it with a tentacle of purple energy. Purge disappeared, followed by Deceit's Evertardis. Moments later, there was silence in the clearing as the embers of the bonfire sparked back to life, creating a gentle warmth and orange glow which was cast about the forest. Beside the heat of the small fire appeared a crimson patch of energy, faded at first. This scarlet and sangria light stretched into a large square, glowing more intensely as the red energy shot up from the earth, forming into a large scarlet rectangle. There was a sound of a chorus of mechanical angels. The crimson glow faded, revealing a standard red British phone booth. The door opened, and footsteps fell, which led to Jack Valentine, who lay sleeping next to an unconscious and comfortable-looking Jade. The man in red knelt and typed something onto his time watch, emitting a sound which awoke the sleepers. Valentine sat up first, staring at the stranger in the crimson suit.
Who in the hell are you?
Jade awoke, rubbing her eyes, seeing nothing but a sangria-colored shadow.
Don't worry,
the Time Lord in red answered.
you know me. I'm an old friend. Now get up. We got things to do.